Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today for my Monday This and That video, and I got a lot of stuff to talk about today. For those of you who are new, this is just a weekly vlog that I do to give you updates on things, let you know stuff that's going on, to answer any questions that may have come in the past week, and to lead you back to some old videos to teach you how to do some of the things I might be talking about. So let's get started on the topics of today. First thing is the fermented eggs. So this is my first batch for the season. Once my chickens start laying heavily, I do like to make some fermented eggs. It's one of the ways that I use up some of the excess we have coming in. Besides dehydrating, my new favorite way to preserve the excess eggs is dehydrating, and I have a video on that I'll link to down below. And I also have a couple videos on this. One is an old one where I'm just making them very plain. I didn't add anything but salt. And then one is a short that I did a couple of years ago where I'm adding the red pepper, I think garlic, and fresh rosemary, which I love to add. But I didn't this time. I didn't even go out and look to see if my rosemary is even starting to get fresh growth on it yet. I kind of doubt it. But that is one of my favorite things to add. So it just takes 3 days or more, depending on how much of that ferment you want into the egg. And it's a good way to kind of preserve them temporarily, but just to get a more healthy hard-boiled egg. And I love them. When I have them ready, I will eat a couple every day. And I decided to start going quart jars instead of half gallons. So once this one's ready, I just started it last night, then I'll get another one started in a quart. That way it's a little easier to work through and easier to find places to store it. Sometimes I'll just leave them out on the counter as I'm working through them, and sometimes I put them in the fridge. That's all. It really doesn't matter since they're fermented if you leave them out or put them in the fridge. It just depends on if you want to stop the fermentation process at a certain point, then you might want to stick it in the fridge. But usually it doesn't take me long to work through them anyway, so I've got to where a lot of times I just leave them on the counter. So anyway, in this one I did use my raisin fermentation starter. This was actually, I think, a rhubarb one that I then converted to raisin so I could get all the old rhubarb out of there. And if you're interested in how to make a fermentation starter, I have a pretty in-depth video on that. You can use anything to make it. I'll link to it in the description box down below. Now, if you're not familiar with how to open the description box, simply click on Show More in all caps right down here below my channel name if you're on a computer, or you'll see a little gray arrow on this side if you're on a smart device, and you'll touch that to open the description box to find the links and other information that I always put in there. And then, speaking of fermenting, I'm going to get some more fermented citrus peels going because I'm really enjoying that. Now to where I have maybe about an ounce 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and then evening before I go to bed. And then here's the orange peel fermentation starter, and that's what I'll be using for this particular blend here. And of course, I'm going to be doing the raw honey again just to give it more health benefits. Now understand, when you're talking about ferments like this, though I don't need to use sugar in things like eggs and vegetables, like when I'm making kimchi, typically though sugar is necessary for fermenting, and a lot of people don't understand that. Whether it be in the form of an organic cane sugar, honey, or anything that's a good healthy sugar. It can't be monk fruit sweetener, it can't be stevia. You can add those for sweetness, but that's all they're good for. The sugar is necessary for fermenting, especially like making vinegar or wines. But once the fermentation process has worked all the way through those sugars, there's no sugar left in it. It just depends where in the process you want to stop it. Now when I'm doing this, I'm only giving it a few days to ferment, and then I store it in the refrigerator to slow that process way down. And that way it still has some sweetness in it, but some of the sugars have been converted to something a little more healthy. And I don't fear sugar. I think there's too much fear being put on sugar in general. It's not sugar that's the enemy, it's the type of sugar and the amount of sugar that matters. But sugar is actually an important part of our diet, whether it be we're getting it straight from fruits or from honey. Remember, in the Bible, they did eat honey. So it's not an evil, wicked thing. I think there's just too much fear-mongering over that. Just like with anything else, it's about watching your consumption. You can eat too many organic almonds or kale or even drink too much water. So everything has to have a certain amount of moderation to it. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about some other questions that came in about the sweaters that you saw me make in that video I did about why I wear skirts, how I wear skirts, and so on. And you saw a lot of the sweaters I had made. So a lot of people were asking where to find the patterns for the sweaters. Well, instead of me taking the time to hunt all those down again, which I did on my own years ago, I found the patterns and I printed them out. They are all free. Except for one, the one, if I don't remember if I showed the red sweater pattern in that one I bought from Etsy years ago. But everything else I found for free. All you have to do is go into your browser and put in, since I crochet, I put free crochet sweater patterns, and then just started going through all the pages until I found sweaters I really liked. Now, most of the sweaters that you see were ones I found on the Karen site or on the Drops website, and they're all free. Also, another place is a place called Ravelry that you can look at. A lot of times you can find free patterns. Some of them are purchase patterns. That's where I actually found the link for the red sweater pattern, even though I had to buy it from Etsy. And the same thing goes with Afghan patterns. You can find Afghan patterns for free the same way. But the Afghan I was talking about in last week's video was actually from an old pattern book I'd bought back in late 1990s called Blue Ribbon Patterns. It's actually still available. I'll go ahead and link to it down below. I think that one has patterns for both crochet and knitted Afghans. And so those pattern books were great. I bought at least 2 different ones, and I loved those. I've made quite a few different Afghans out of each of those books, but they can be kind of spendy, but you'll always have it. And I've used them so many times. It was worth the investment I made many years ago to get those books. I believe the name of that particular pattern in the book is called Sherbet Stripes, but you have to understand, when somebody creates an Afghan design or a sweater design, they will give it a name. That doesn't mean that's a stitch name or a style name. That's the name they gave to that particular pattern. So if you look up Sherbet Stripes Afghan, you could find all kinds of different patterns that might be somewhat similar or very, very different. And something else you should understand about patterns is some people don't understand the name between a style of Afghan or a type of stitch. You can't just say shell stitch and then know exactly what it means, because it's going to depend on the pattern it's being used in, what that shell stitch is exactly like. There's so many different options for a shell stitch. So that's one thing you have to understand about stitches. It's knowing the exact type of stitch. So you got to learn how to read patterns to understand how all that works. And the same thing goes with the style of Afghan. So a mile a minute Afghan is not a stitch. It is a style. So mile a minute can be done in so many different ways, but basically what it is, it's a pattern that is worked in strips, and then the strips are crocheted or hand stitched together. I've made, in fact, my very first crochet project I did was a mile a minute Afghan. It was pretty simple. In fact, I think I have a picture I'll put right here. Very first anything crochet I ever made. And I was surprised at how simple it was to throw it together. So you worked in strips and you stitched it together. Other ones can involve, like I've done several with the daisy pattern, and it's a mile a minute Afghan, but all the stitches in there are very different. I've done one with a lilac pattern. I've done ones with a braided pattern. That one was really cool. I love doing the braided one. It's a lot of work, but that was a fun one. But all those patterns I gathered from different books that I had. So I can't give you links to those. I can give you links to the pattern books if you're interested in looking that up. And with that in mind, talking about craft projects, if you remember last week's video, I was talking about the Afghan as well as the quilt I was going to put together for my new grandson, who's due in a couple months. And I actually finished it in a day. I couldn't believe it. So I'll put a couple other pictures here, but you can see that I used the space pattern as a border as well as part of the backing. I actually changed it a little bit because the way it was coming out, I ended up using some of the blue galaxy print in the very middle of the back and then bordered around that with the fabric with the planets on it. And I really like how it turned out. I'm glad it ended up that way because I think it added more interest to the back. So it was very fun. These are all recycled jeans and jean skirts I put in here. Some were ours, some were ones that people had given me, but I think there's at least one pair of jeans in there that was my son's, so that'll be the baby's dad's jeans that are in there as well. So that's pretty cool. And anyway, it was a fun process. No, I don't have a video specifically on how to make a quilt like this. I do have one where I explain how to make the rag style quilt, which I did for Jackson before he was born, and I'll link to that video down below. And then somebody was asking me about air cleaners. Now, what I found that if you saw my video from last week about the mucus, and I was still kind of dealing with that back there, it's mostly gone now. So we got to realize that some of those videos, this and that videos, are the ones that are only a difference of about 3 days from the time I shoot it to the time you see it. But my other videos can be 2, 3, and even 4 weeks apart. So it's mostly gone. And running the air cleaners, I think, has been the #1 thing. So that tells me for certain whatever is causing that irritation at the back behind my epiglottis, that was also causing the mucus to want to build up back in there to put that protective layer on like it's meant to do. That tells me it definitely was something in the air, because running the air cleaners 24/7 has really helped. And so people were asking me, well, what kind of air cleaners do you have? Well, the one I keep in the bedroom is massive. We got it many years ago at Costco. It's one of those big HEPA ones. And I put it in there because now I finally have a big shelf that I can put it way up on top and keep it out of the way because it's so big. But I did more recently buy some smaller ones for in the living room, but I did get a couple of them just because I knew that I would need more than just one because of the size, but I didn't want something so big that was going to take up a lot of space. And these ones do have a UV light, and they do seem to be working well. I'll go ahead and put the link to those ones down below so you can check them out for yourself, because like I said, they really do seem to be helping me in this area. But what you're probably hearing in my voice right now is actually just the last remnants of the big C, which finally hit us after over 2 years. And honestly, I am so glad. I am so glad to finally have it done and behind us for the most part. Just some very minor lingering symptoms. I'm going to be talking about that soon in a video, but we're doing great. I'm actually glad it came through and we got it over with, and I actually feel a lot better because of it. It's kind of funny because you'd think having that would have made this other issue worse, but it seems like since then it's actually gotten better. So right now what you're hearing is just a little bit of congestion in my sinuses and a little roughness in my throat from coughing up the mucus out of my lungs, but other than that I feel really great. And so and my energy levels are back, and I'm so glad, because I had to take a break from the exercises for about a week straight, and I hated that, but it was because my muscles were so tired. I could not do it. Every time I'd try, I'd just like, oh my gosh, I was so exhausted. But now my energy levels are back, so now I'm back to the grind again, and it feels great. But I want to do a more in-depth video about what we did to help ourselves out. And one thing I'll say right off the bat, get fresh air and sunlight. You'll be amazed at what you can do. Even if you're in that phase where you're really weak and your muscles are really sore, just find a place to go sit in the sun, even if you have to do it inside, and then try your best to get some fresh air. I was amazed at how good it would make me feel. So even when I was still kind of sore and fatigued, I would get outside and do a little bit of work in the garden, whatever I could handle, and just doing that alone really seemed to speed up the healing right there. But we did do a few other things I'll talk about, including the fermented citrus peels, the cinchona bark, and some black seed, and taking higher doses of vitamin C to help flush the body out. So a lot of things you can do to really help yourself, but it's all got to be tailored to you. Some people will need to take zinc. For me, that was not an option because it makes me sick. It's a heavy metal. It does the same thing to me that taking too much iron does. And then one more thing I wanted to say before I close out this video. So if you saw my turpentine video, I think it's going to be about 2 weeks out now, the comments under there were excellent. So many great comments of people sharing their own personal testimony of how they use turpentine, how their parents use turpentine, how their grandparents use turpentine for so many different things, even deep wounds. That one I was really excited to read about, because I was in that video, I was talking about how I was a little bit hesitant at using it on deep cuts and stuff like that. But I had at least 2 or 3 different people share a testimony about that, and it was pretty cool. So go check out that video if you haven't seen it yet, And please read the comments. Lots of great interaction there and very exciting. But remember, just like anything else, everything has to be done in moderation. But all I know is what I've been doing has been working good for me. I've been using it for years off and on. More recently, getting back into it, using it mostly just topically, and even that alone has done a lot to help me out in a lot of ways. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to check out the links I'll be putting in the description box down below, and share any thoughts or ideas you have in comments about any of the things I mentioned. And thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.